Okay. So first of all, let's talk about Visualforce. Okay. Then I'll come to the Apex part also. Visualforce. So by now we have understood Visualforce. We understood, understand how to use the components. You know what is a component on a Visualforce. We know what is a page. We know what is an attribute on Visualforce, right? So there are a lot of things. I mean, you might have noticed when we start writing a Visualforce page. Let me go here. Let me start. Let me create a Visualforce page here. Yeah. So I'm just taking an example of this Visualforce page, which is here. So you might have noticed whenever you start typing in a component, this is a big list of components that you get to see, right? And we are definitely not going to talk about each and every component here, or the attributes. Now these are the components. Now every component has attributes, right? So it's more like a huge thing. So we have not talked about everything, and we will not even talk about everything in the sessions. But overall, you have understood how to use a component and all. Now if you know the functionality of a component, why that component is used and how that attribute is called on that, you can easily use it. You will not have a challenge, right? So where would you get all these details? So your first friend for Visualforce will be, see, whatever we do in the training, our training program is limited to certain areas, right? But when you start preparing for an interview, or when you go for a job, you are on a project, you are working on something, you have to explore everything. So then you cannot just go and look into the codes that you have done in your training, right? So your first friend for Visualforce will be component reference library. Anyone who has seen where is the component reference library? Okay, here it is. Where you have the code or editor, you have a component reference library. You just click on this component reference. This is where it is. Again, I do not want to say that go through each and every one of those unnecessarily. Don't waste time on that. Rather, spend time on making a story around whatever you have done in the examples. Because for you to clear an interview, no one will ask you that, okay, fine, you tell me the syntax of this, otherwise you are not selected. They will ask you questions more on the concept side, right? But this is something that you would need when you are writing a code or something, and you just want to figure out, okay, fine, is there a way of using this or that and all those things, and read it. Now the good part of this component reference library is that you can pick a component, any one of those, and then you can just let's say input text. We have used input text, so let me take input text. Okay, now we have used another one called input field. Must be here, right? Now if you start feeling what is the difference between input text and input field, read it here. This will clear things for you. Okay, what are the attributes inside that? Any component you choose in the component reference library, it will give you a complete list of all the attributes. Okay, so those attributes you can look at. Okay, and you can read about the attributes and all those things from here. Some of these attributes in most of the components, some of the attributes are related to JavaScript or CSS. Style of that component can be defined using CSS class or the JavaScript code. So that is one thing. Fine, I'll come to the JavaScript and the CSS part also. So that's about the list of attributes. So for everything you have list of attributes. Again, some of the attributes you might not understand, and the ones that you are using and you understand the logic of that, that is how you have to go. Now For everything, the good part is that for everything there is an example given. For every component you have an example how to use that. Fine. So you can easily use those things. For example, this command link we have done already. So usage, you can click and see how to write that thing. And you can also read the details and read the attributes of that. Fine. Like we did one thing called tabs, apex tab. No, not tab panel, right? So in that tab panel we had a component, attribute called switch type, right? And I think one of you asked me a question, what are the other switch types or something like that, right? One is Ajax. So go and read it here. Switch type, okay. So what are the possible? There is one more thing that we did is what is that? For the buttons we put it's page block buttons. Okay. We did page block buttons. Remember to replicate the button at the top and at the bottom. So page block button. In case you just want to define the location of that, I think location or something, some attribute is here. Yeah, location attribute is here. The area of the page where the button should be rendered. Possible values include, what are the possible values there? Top, bottom or both. So if you just want it at top, you can put top. By default it's both. Okay. So these small things, right? So component reference library is your first thing for Visualforce. That's number one. So component reference library, where will you get it? Click on component reference from your Visualforce editor. Okay, so where you have the Visualforce code editor, from there you can simply click on that and get to your component reference library. So that is number one. Now there is another thing for Visualforce. The second thing that you have to do is the next thing that you have to do is use the Visualforce workbook. So I'll give you the link to this Visualforce workbook, or you can easily find it on Google also. Now this workbook is again, there are a few examples that we have done. The workbook has a few more examples, right? So you can practice the workbook and you will get to know a few more components in that way, right? And it's very pretty much explanatory workbook. So let me show this workbook also to you. The second thing that you will use is your workbook. You don't have to do anything, you just have to go to Google and type Visualforce workbook. Okay, so when you say Visualforce workbook, you have a PDF version of it and you have a HTML version of it, whichever. So if you want to download the PDF, you can do that. I normally prefer working on the HTML version. So some of the examples are very simple, so I don't think you will need to spend time on those. Some are a little new for you, so you can work on those. Like importing data with forms is nothing, you have already done that. Creating a template out of a Visualforce page. creating a template of Visualforce page, this is something that you can do, right? So how do you create a template for a Visualforce page? For example, you have a lot of pages which need to be designed with the same template. You can have a same header, footer kind of thing, and the same template you want to repeat in most of your Visualforce pages. So instead of you going and writing the code again and again, can you define a template? Yes. So there is an option of creating a template on Visualforce page, right? So creating a template for a Visualforce page is again very simple. You just need to create one Visualforce page as template, okay, and then call that template on the other Visualforce page. That is how it is, right? So this is one example of reusing pages with templates. Now you can just read the instructions and follow. Nothing else needs to be done, right? So first of all, go create a basic template page, and then how do you call it? Use a template with another page. So this is the template page you have created. Give it any name. How do you call it on the other page to be used as a template? You will call it using another component called Apex composition. So Apex composition is basically used for calling one Visualforce page on the other Visualforce page. So that is it. So you are actually creating a composition, and there on the composition there is a template concept. So when you're creating a Visualforce page and calling components from other pages, so this template is an attribute, and you will just give the name of your previous page, the template page. That's it. Nothing else needs to be done here, right? So the other way is include. So template can be used using composition, or there is another component called include. Include will include one page inside the other page, right? So it will not call it as a template or something, but it will include one page inside the other page. Fine. Ram, you want to say something? Okay, seems to be offline. Got it. So this is one example. So this workbook has a couple of more examples. Like I think there is one more for creating a Visualforce email template. Okay, this tutorial 10 is also good. You can learn how to create a new component on Visualforce, right? How do you create a new component on Visualforce? So whatever components we have, in case we want to create our own components, that is again something that you don't need to get into, and don't need to get confused on that, because that is again not primary thing. You don't need to know it right now. It's a very simple concept of creating your own components and putting some thing there, but that is a pretty high level thing. It's very simple to create a component. I'm not saying that creating a component is something which is very complex. Creating a component is as simple as you just going and clicking on setup. No, not on this. Okay, so you just need to go to setup, and then you will need to go to develop and say components. So from here you can create a Visualforce component, but that again a concept that you would not want to do it right now. Okay, so you can just click on a new component and create a new component, but first priority is for you to learn and understand your basic components which are already given by Salesforce, rather than using your own defined components, right? So but in case you want to go back and learn how to create a component, it's very simple. So it's a two-step tutorial, and you can just go and learn it. Put some code here, and then how do you call that component on the Visualforce page? That's fine. Whatever code you will put inside the component, that can be called using your component. That is what it is. That is what it means, right? So simple. All right. So There's this example. So the second friend is your Visualforce workbook. So for Visualforce workbook, let me put the link here also. Alright. So two things we have seen. Now third and the most important thing is Visualforce reference guide. Now, what is this Visualforce reference guide? Now, reference guide is a typical reference guide kind of a thing, big book with I think a few hundred pages and all. Difficult to read and follow, but you can keep it with you. Where do you get this Visualforce reference guide? Here it is. Not reference guide, it's called Visualforce Developers Guide, sorry. Visualforce Developers Guide. So this is also, the PDF as well as HTML versions are available for this one as well. So you can actually go to the reference guide, but reference guide will be, something that I would suggest that you should go to it at a later point of time, not initially, because it has too many, too much of details and all those things, and you might not have time, to read all that unnecessary stuff. Reference guide, basically what happens with a reference guide is you have too much of theory involved into that, and you do not have that much of time to read each and everything. So, but this is also a good thing. It's more like in a PDF, I think it's a few thousand pages. If not few thousand, I think at least a few hundred pages. Alright, so that's about our Visualforce reference guide. Fine. Okay. So these are three things: your component reference library, your Visualforce workbook, and your Visualforce reference guide. So workbook, I would want you to spend some time, practice some things. I mean, a few of those you might already be knowing, and a few of those you can just have a look and practice. That will make your understanding better. Visualforce reference guide will give you some hint on how to use codes and all those things, but again, as I said, reference guide will have much of theory and less of coding. So component reference library in that way is a better thing, so you can see what references you can use and all that stuff. So that is one thing. Now, other thing in Visualforce we wanted to talk is, in Visualforce we can use HTML, and HTML we use directly, right? User tags directly. For HTML we do not have any challenge, right? We have used in fact a few HTML tags and all those things in Visualforce, right? You can also use CSS in Visualforce. So how do you use CSS? So before that, anyone who does not know what is CSS, we all know, right? Styling, cascade, what styles, something. I do not know the full form, but this is for basically styling, right? So CSS is used on HTML pages also for doing the styling. If you have seen in any of our components, we do not have a styling factor. So in case you want to control how your text will appear, how the background will appear, cascading style sheets. Yes, Santosh. Yeah, that's correct. So I'm bad in remembering these names. So this CSS is basically for controlling the style of the page, right? So Usually we don't require to do a lot with the CSS, because the advantage with our Visualforce is it comes up with the default Salesforce styling, right? So every component, you might have noticed, has a styling defined. The moment you use component, you will see it properly designs it with the standard or the default Salesforce style, right? Which makes it look professional also. I mean, you would definitely not want a data page to be in a red or pink color and all those things. I mean, it's not a website, right? So Salesforce has made our lives easier by giving that part, that okay, fine, all the components have their default styling, and that looks pretty professional. But sometimes you will be in a situation where you are required to bring in some styling and all that stuff, and that is where you will need to use your CSS. Okay, so for CSS, in case you are aware of the CSS thing, you must be knowing that CSS can be defined within that page, or it can be defined in an external page, right? So in Visualforce page, how do we define the CSS? Let's go and see that. So any styling that you want to define in page CSS, you can just define it in the page itself. Okay, you can just define a style, call it anything dot my style. Okay, and then you can define whatever you want to, with the font color or something like that. So for CSS things, I refer to this W3 schools. As I said, I mean, not practically possible for us to know all the tags and all those things. We just need to know how it needs to be used for for font colors and all these things. This for fonts, right? Color. Text. Color equals blue. That's it. So if you want to define a style where you want to have the color equals blue or whatever you want to set, define it like this, and then you can use it in the component reference library. You would have noticed that most of these tags that we use in Salesforce have that space for defining the class. Like if I am defining a tab panel, there must be some like header class, my style, label, sorry, not on tab panel, let me use it on a tab. Fix. We use a class. Style. So you can just define a style class here and then you can call it. So all those CSS classes which are there on a component, you can call any of the CSS class on the component, anything that you have defined. Okay, so in case you want to define your style here, before you start coding, just write this style, and within the style thing you define all your CSS classes or style classes, right? So any formatting, usually again I would say rare occasions you will get into this styling part of it. Most of the time we work with the standard Salesforce things because it is it looks professional, it is in sync, the design. Now you see this one is looking a little odd. So the design that Salesforce has given is in sync with their actual background and everything, and it's pretty fine. And we are more of the technical guys, we are not the designers again, so we might not have that good idea of to design and put the styles and all those things, but this is how it is to be used. Now this is one thing. Now in case you have another all your style classes defined in a different document, okay, this is just one example, but in case you have 20 classes, 20 style classes, then will you define everything on this Visualforce page? In case you define it that way, then it will be a little difficult for you to manage. Also, I mean, the page will become longer and lengthier. So that is how we work on CSS, right? So CSS on HTML page also we can call the CSS class from a different document, right? So same thing can be done here. You can have this thing in a different file also, and you can call it from a different file. But for that, you have to understand where your CSS file has to be, right? If you want to have your CSS in a different document, then can it be in your local computer? No, because if it is on your local computer, it will not be available on the cloud every time, right? So here comes the concept of, where are we? So we have seen how to use CSS. Now here comes the concept of static resources. Okay, what is static resource? Static resources, anything that you would, any document or any file that you would need for your Visualforce pages or whatever things. That is what static resources. Okay. So static resource is a space where you can upload your files and documents. Okay, where do we have static resources? Our static resources option is here. When you go to setup, develop static resources, you see this? So this is the place where you should upload all your CSS files, image files. In case CSS is one option, in case you want to use an image on your Visualforce page, company's logo, you should upload all those things. Use static resources to upload content that you want to reference in Visualforce page, including .zip and .zar files, images, style sheets, JavaScript. So style sheets, your JavaScript, everything, all those documents. Either, so for CSS, what are the two options that we have? Either I write the CSS here, then there is no requirement of static resources. In case I have created a CSS file style sheet and I want to reference my classes from there, I have to make sure, because Salesforce should be able to find that, right? Whenever it is running. Now I have created a Visualforce page and the style sheet is on my computer. How will you get to see that from your computer? So this is all on cloud. So style sheets, images, whatever you put, all those need to be uploaded on static resources. You should ideally upload your style sheet here, okay, and this can be then referenced on your Visualforce page. So there is a specific syntax for that. In fact, there is a small mention of that in this one of these books, using static resources. Referencing a static resource on a Visualforce markup. So how do you do that? You just have to, for images, this is the syntax. For your JavaScript, this is the syntax. So you see, you just have to say what kind of static resource you are using. Is it image or is it JavaScript, and then you can just call it like this. For style sheet, you have to just say this. Right. So there is a small example also here which you can use and understand about your static resources a little better. Fine. So but I think we are clear on this static resource concept, right? So you can then put your CSS style sheets there, and then you can reference your style sheet classes there on this. Okay, so that is about our CSS. Now JavaScript. JavaScript is also same.
Jeet?
Yep.
For this style sheets, here you said that we'll maintain like this, but where will we actually create a style? Like how do we create a style, and what will be the URL?
No.
Can you show it in an example?
Give me 1 minute. So anything related to CSS will be here. For example, on W3 schools, I mean whatever related to this thing you want to find out, you can just find out from here. Basically what you will do is you just will create, I do not see, I mean this is the place where you will find most of the details related to CSS. Now the question that you asked is, you just have to create a style sheet. Okay, so for creating style sheet, what you will do, you will copy this style, whatever style you have. Like this way you can have multiple classes. So this should ideally be in a notepad and saved as a .css file, and that file becomes a style sheet. Got it? So the way we create a HTML file, the same way we create a style sheet. Got that thing? And that file you will have to upload. So my point is that instead of referencing it from here, we are putting it in a different document, save it as a style sheet. Style sheet needs to be uploaded on the static resource. Got that thing? For example, one option is you write your style classes and all those things here on the Visualforce page. Other option is write everything on a notepad on a different file. Okay. Save the file, upload it on your static resource folder in the Salesforce, and reference it on the Visualforce page. So this cycle is clear now. So instead of writing the entire stuff on the Visualforce page and making my Visualforce page very long and complex, I can put it on style sheet. And the advantage of having things on the style sheet is that you don't have to write the same thing again and again. Same style sheet, if there are certain classes that you have defined, okay, same thing you can call in all the pages. So the biggest advantage is that you don't have to write it again and again, but whatever you write on a Visualforce page is only restricted to that Visualforce page. You cannot call it to some other page, right? So if you have a specified set of classes, you should put it in a style sheet so that you can call it on any of the Visualforce page. Let's say there is a client who has come to you and said that, okay, I want things in the red and a blue format or background. You created classes for that, right? So for every page, you don't have to do that. You are creating pages for them, 7, 8, 10 different pages. You can call the same class. Clear on this, Santosh?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now there is one small thing that comes to mind is, again, that is for your information. We don't have to get too much into details for that also. One place where you will need to use your CSS is if you are developing some pages for mobile. Okay, so developing some pages for mobile does not mean that you need to know Android or you need to know iOS, nothing. Salesforce apps are by default mobile usable apps, so you can use Salesforce Visualforce pages on mobile also, so that is not a problem. In case you are creating some page for your mobile users, you want to create a tab which should open a page for the mobile users, so you would instruct your mobile users that go and click on this tab and that page will open, right? So it is, that's for your general understanding, it is always recommended that on mobile or on any Salesforce pages that you want to be accessed through a mobile phone, you would not use your Apex components, page block and all those things, because all of them have predefined styles and all, right? Because of those predefined styles, those are pretty heavy. All these Salesforce components or the Visualforce components we have seen are pretty heavy, right? So if it is heavy, it performance wise it does not perform that good. So these Visualforce components are good if you are creating it for desktop. If you are creating a Visualforce page for the mobile thing, you should avoid the Visualforce components and use these styling. Again, you will have to do some bit of styling for that, right? So there your styling is pretty much useful. So that's for your knowledge. Okay. And Salesforce apps, I think you all already know this, right? All Salesforce apps are default mobile apps. You can open them on mobile. So app is what I mean, nothing. You just have to open a Salesforce application on mobile, the way you are opening it on desktop, right? And you can open your app, right? So in case the end user has to view that page on the mobile, then it is recommended that you don't use these page block components or the page block section, because you see that there are so many attributes and all those things attached to it that makes it a little heavy. So it's okay for desktop, but for mobile it might not be that fine. Okay. So that is the other thing. Now coming to the JavaScript. So JavaScript is pretty similar to our CSS. CSS is for styling, JavaScript is for scripting actions, right? So in case you are not aware of JavaScript, again I would say go back to your w3schools.com and go to learn JavaScript. You will get few small codes here, like let me take JavaScript on click alert. So yeah. Yes. So let's say this on click you want to put an alert. So this way you can put any scripting action there. So to understand more about JavaScript, you should go into this. Again, this is not a primarily important thing for you because you are not learning JavaScript. This reference you can always do, right? Instead of alert, if you want to open some thing in a new window, or you want to open something in a new tab, or you just want to show some message, so all those options you can refer here anytime. So you don't have to learn the entire JavaScript right now. You just need to know how to call a JavaScript here. So calling JavaScript is again similar. You have the option of defining the script here directly. So for JavaScript, you should say this, and then you can just say on click equals to alert are you sure, something like this, right? So you can define your JavaScript here, or the same concept, go and save it in a file, upload it on the static resource and use it. So that is how it is, right? This is how it's defined. Just have to see the syntax. Yes. So that is it. Now you have a lot of options where you have that JavaScript option. Button is just one. There are other things. So command button, all in case you want to display an alert. If you want a function to run at the back end when you click on that button, small function. See, do we know why do we use JavaScript? What is the functionality of JavaScript? CSS is for styling. Why do we use JavaScript? Anyone? Quickly. We have understood CSS is for styling the components on any HTML page, or now we see on Visualforce page also. But why would we need JavaScript? Who knows why JavaScript? Yeah, Ram.
I think JavaScript is used to execute any of the code or any of the functionality which doesn't depend on the server, and it can be a client-side processing.
Right, very correct. So I mean, I'll put it in a few simpler words. What Ram said. So for people who could not understand that part, simple thing is, in case you just want to perform a small calculation or small scripting, see, Visualforce is a proper markup language. That's true. Markup language means it can just we can just put markup components there, right? So when we are talking about markups, we are talking about the look and feel. The front end UI components can be put there, right? Now my problem is that in case I just want to put a small thing, more than Visualforce page, think of HTML. We'll come to Visualforce later. So HTML is also a markup language. You can just define the visible components on your HTML, right? Now if you just want to put a small script, a small logic, HTML cannot define. HTML is not capable of defining that, right? So for that you can put your logics and those kind of things into JavaScript. So it's a scripting language. You can define a script, right? So for the same way, if you are designing a Visualforce page, in Visualforce you have that option of Apex. We can define all the logics on Apex, right? But the point is, do I need to go to Apex every time if I am using a standard controller and I want a small alert to be displayed? I don't need to go to Apex and all that stuff. I can simply take help of some JavaScript. So fine. So there are some JavaScript things, scripting options which are available. You can easily, use those and put the conditions, show the error messages, alerts, these kind of things you can easily use, and you don't have to use anything, you don't have to use Apex and all those things. You can just define the script here and use it. Fine. And then JavaScript again has a set of, like, giving an alert, opening it in a new window. These kind of things are very specific to JavaScript, so you will just use it with JavaScript. Got that thing? So use of our JavaScript and CSS. So in both the cases we have option of define it on the page. So static resource, let me write it after this JavaScript concept. On page or through static resource. For your interviews, if you know this much, I think you will not need more things. But yeah, for practical thing, you will need more things, right? Whenever you require something, reference back to W3 schools, take the syntax, work on it. Fine. But it's good to understand how things work actually. Okay. So this is on our Visualforce. So these are a few things that I wanted to talk on Visualforce. So now you know how to use JavaScript on Visualforce, how to use CSS on Visualforce, how to use HTML, so you already know. And how to use static resources. So in case you want to bring some image or something on this Visualforce page, that also can be done through static resource. Okay. So that's about Visualforce page. Now let's go to the Apex.
Jit, one question.
Yep. Tell me.
When we are talking about static resource, right? Is it the same when we were talking about some storage capacity for each individual edition?
No, that is different.
That's not the file storage we are talking here, right?
No, that is different. That is not static resource. That is your documents. That is like data. This is static resource. This is metadata. Got it?
Okay.
So that is actual data. So this, the one that you are talking about is documents. So there is an object called documents where you can upload your documents. That you will find under. Do you see documents here? Yeah, here it is. Fine. So documents is different from static resources. So documents is a different object which is meant for storing our documents, like your customer agreements. So these are not files, these are not style sheets or JavaScripts or something like that. These are actual PDF document, Excel spreadsheet, Microsoft Word document, any kind of document, right?
Okay, and when we store those documents, can we refer them in any of the Visualforce? It's just for storage purpose. That's what you're saying.
Okay. Tell me, when you say refer them, what do you mean refer them?
I mean, when we save some kind of documents, let's say we have saved an Excel sheet, and what user does it have in Salesforce? Like only for storing purpose, so that it is on the cloud and everyone who has access to this folder can refer to the document, or anything else is there? Like, let's say if you want to import this Excel sheet, you can directly use this location and you're coding and read this Excel and import the data from the Excel.
No, acha. So good question. Now Salesforce will not read any of those documents. So what we have to understand, documents when we are talking about, or whenever we are uploading documents on Salesforce, documents is again an object, a table. So like account, contacts, leads, what we have to understand, documents is also a table or an object where we can put data, right? What Salesforce can do? It can go and fetch that document. So when we are talking about referencing a document in a Visualforce page or in an Apex code, we can reference that. There is no problem with that. Why there is no problem? Because it's considered as any other object. Fine. Like for example, you want to reference a document and send it. Tell me.
Let me give a synonym or so in let's say if you take any database like Oracle RDBMS, then all the blob or the picture files where you put in blob columns, it is similar to that, right? Because document now is an object, and in your object you are saving your blob files or something. Is it similar to that, or am I confusing everyone now?
You are rather confusing me with that part because I am not aware of that. Let me just put it in simpler words in the Salesforce context. So for Salesforce, a document is more like an object where all your documents will be stored. Now Salesforce can reference to those documents. For example, I'm giving a simpler example here. Let's say there is a document that you have uploaded on the documents folder, and in some of your email you want to attach that document. Fine. So in our Apex thing, we saw it in our last session that how we can send an email, automated email through Apex and all. So where we did a set to address, set subject, set body, there we have an option of setting attachments also, right? So you can attach also something. So you can fetch something from the document. So in that ways you can always refer to it, right? So attachment and sending it through an attachment is just one option. Okay, yeah. So we were discussing about this documenting, right? So I was just giving you the details of the document. So what it is a document is just like a piece of data which is stored in an object. Okay. Now you can refer to the document the way we refer to any data field from any of other objects. That's absolutely fine. But the point is that Salesforce does not have the capability of reading through the document. It cannot get inside the document. So in case you plan to go and read something inside the document, Salesforce does not have that capability. But yeah, it can always refer to the document. So an example that we were talking about is sending it as an attachment. Let's say you want to pick some document ID, and through that document ID you want to fetch the document and attach it. So it can completely process that document, attach it in the email and send it, right? But it cannot get inside that. Okay. Whereas for static resources, what is happening? These are specific types of files, either style sheets or JavaScripts or image, and Salesforce is getting inside that. So that is the thing. And documents are more again of the data thing, and this CSS or the JavaScript is more of the metadata. So not the data actually, right? So does that make things clear, Ram? Fine on that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So now let's move on to our next thing, which is the Apex. So I'll be sharing this Word doc with you all post the session. Now this is what you needed to know on Visualforce, and this is what is going to be for okay, for JavaScript and this thing also. Let me just write W3 schools. So this is going to be pretty useful for you. Okay. Now let's move on to Apex. So in Apex, what do we need to understand, and where do we actually what do we refer to in case we need help? So Apex, first thing that we need to understand how we use Apex and where do we use Apex, right? So we have seen we use Apex with the controllers on the page, which means combining my code with the UI part, right? Second, we have seen combining the code with the DML operations, right? So whatever Apex you are defining, one you are using it with the UI or Visualforce through what do you call this, through controllers, right? This is what we have done on Apex. Other way of using Apex is on DML operations. So trigger is an example of that, right? So in trigger, what do? We just go and we define the what do you call this trigger. So when you define a trigger, do you have an option of controlling when that trigger will work and not? It simply works, right? I mean, the moment the DML operation happens, the trigger works, right? So that is with the DML operation. Okay. Sometimes there is another concept that you need to know, which is asynchronous. Do you know what is asynchronous? These both are synchronous code. Both these things are synchronous. You can have asynchronous Apex also. Anyone who is aware of what is asynchronous? Asynchronous is not in sync.
Asynchronous is not in sync. Yeah.
Yeah. So one is in sync, one is not in sync. Okay. So synchronous is something which happens as a part of a flow and it happens instantly, right? So something like the Apex that we have, that we use with controller on click of button, does it get delayed? Does it happen after a day or something? No, it happens on the click of button. For DML operation, it's again the same thing. Another type of Apex is asynchronous. What is this asynchronous? Asynchronous is where you define some Apex to work asynchronously. Okay, not in sync, not on something, right? So for asynchronous, we have an option of Apex scheduler, where you can define or schedule an Apex to run. Okay, that okay, it should run at this particular time. We have batch Apex. Now what is batch Apex? The logic is same method, same everything is same. Just that we have to understand that when the code gets executed, right? So if we are talking about a batch Apex is where you want the Apex to run in batches. So that is again where you define some frequency and it keeps on running or executing the same method. So it does not wait. These are the codes which can automatically run on the backend, keep on running on the backend. They don't need any anything at the front end to happen or any DML operation to happen. You just define a schedule for Apex to run, or you just define a batch Apex which will keep on running, right? So I'll talk on this. We will come to that part. Fine, asynchronous code. So one we have synchronous, one if we have asynchronous code. Got this thing? Okay. Now the point is, what we need to understand apart from these things in Apex. I'm just trying to give you the overall picture on Apex so that you are clear with things. What do we need to understand apart from this in Apex? The okay. Another thing in Apex is what to refer. Okay, so let me have define a few more friends for you in Apex, because what we have learned in Apex, again, like Visualforce, we saw there are so many components. In Apex also there can be other ways of defining things and all. There can be syntaxes and there can be other things. So we do not know each and everything by now. Okay. And again, in same way, we will not do everything in the class. So where do you go for the reference on Apex? So first thing in Apex would be your Apex workbook. So similar to Visualforce workbook, we have an Apex workbook also. And here it is. So this workbook also contains a few things which you might be aware of already, but it has a few things which you will be able to learn new, right? So use this Apex workbook, very helpful workbook. I'll show you this workbook a little later. Before that, I need to talk on a few more concepts. Then there is Apex reference guide. Apex reference guide. Yeah, so this is basically Apex Code Developers Guide. This is a complete developer guide. This is also useful. All right. Okay. So these two documents you can use for Apex, the workbook and the reference guide. Okay. So these two documents you can use for the reference part and all. This is one thing. So Apex reference guide is also pretty much detailed thing. I think it is also a few hundred pages. That will give you each bit of Apex, but you don't need to go into that much of details. You need to understand things overall. It's fine. I mean, if you are able to understand this logic, you can clear any interview. If you know that okay, fine, Apex can be invoked in these methods, that's fine. No interviewer is going to ask you the syntax, and even if they ask you the syntax, you have that thing that okay. I mean, even if you say more or less the syntax are pretty much same, right? So you have that option of saying that okay, fine, this is how I will format, right? And let's say someone says that okay, fine, there is some data update I want to do every day or every night. I'll use batch Apex, right? So that is an asynchronous, that is not happening on a click of button or something like that, right? I want to update some data on click of a button, controller. I want to update some data or whatever. I'm just talking about updating data. It can be anything, right? Any set of instructions. I want to pass on the instructions to my computer on certain thing. So that is where it can be, let's say, on a DML operation. So on trigger. Got it? So I mean, this is all for your understanding that at the time of interview you are able to deal with these kind of things, right? And reference guide, again, this reference guide is always there, which can help you to go through things, learn things and all in longer run. Now there are a few other things. There is another thing. We have done DML operation. Okay. You've done DML operations, right? Now in the DML, what do we do? We have used insert or update. This is what we use, right? I think one or two examples we did. We used insert statement, update statement, right? And these insert and update statements are the normal DML operations. Okay. There is another DML operation that we have in Salesforce, which is called database. Okay. So database is basically a class, a system class which is defined, standard class which is already there in Salesforce, and it has these methods. So you can also say database dot insert a. Fine. So you have, instead of insert a, you can also say this. This option is also available. Okay. Why would we do that? I will just tell you about that part. Just give me. So insert operation we all understand, right? We know what is an insert. Then why would we do a database dot insert? What is the difference between a normal insert versus database dot insert? What is the difference between these two things? The same way is update versus database dot update, upsert versus database dot upsert. So the logic is pretty simple. Okay. What is the logic? Insert, what happens? In this insert, if you use an insert thing, either the complete transaction gets inserted or the complete transaction gets rolled over. Got it? If you are using an insert, the entire transaction is completed or it is rolled over. Let's say there are 10 records and out of 10 the 7th record has an error. The entire set of records will be rolled back for if you are doing an insert. If you are doing a database dot insert, if it has 10 records, 7th one has an error, right? It will skip the 7th one and enter rest 9. Got that thing? So that is the simple logic behind our insert and database dot insert. Here it is. So here is the link for database class. So database is basically a class, and here is the link for that. Fine. So see, here we have delete, undelete, upsert, update options. Fine. And this is how it needs to be defined. So you define database.update, then define your S object. Okay. Update, define S object, database.dml options. So this is how it needs to be defined, right? So this is how it needs to be defined, your database.insert, database.update. So the logic is pretty simple, that database.insert and only insert, the difference is that in a simple insert, either the complete transaction will be inserted or the entire thing will be rolled back. Now to understand this a little better, now what is a transaction? Let us understand what is a transaction, right? So transaction is basically a complete entire set of record which is entered together into the database, which is committed together into the database, right? So let me talk about a transaction on the database. So for that transaction, I will talk about one more thing. Okay. So what happens when we try to insert, or whenever whatever we try to do on a database, DML operation, what is the story, what happens at the back end, right? So I have put a link here for your reference, transaction order of execution. Okay, when you try to insert a record or when you try to update a record, what you need to understand here is you need to understand the complete thing which happens in the backend. So we understand this simple logic that when I try to insert a record, it checks for the validation rules, doesn't it? It checks for the validation rules, right? If you are entering some data which is not as per the defined validations, it will throw error, it will not be inserted, something like that. Again, it checks for other things and other logics and everything, right? So that part is there. Now let us understand in which sequence all these things happen. What is the sequence? So this is the link to that. Okay. So first of all your system validations will work. Okay. So what are system validations? System validations are, see, there are a few things what we have to understand here is. So this is a pretty long list. Let me make it simpler or smaller. First thing is your system validations. What is system validations? The validations that you have not defined, the standard validations by default. Like if you are trying to enter a text into a number field, you did not define a validation for that, right? It's a system validation. So first thing that gets executed is it checks for the system validation, whether you're providing the right data format, whether you are allowed to create a record or not. So, but if you're not allowed, then definitely it will not even give you that screen to enter the data. Any other thing apart from that? So system defined validations will be first of all checked. correct format and all those things will be checked. Then your all before triggers, fine. Then your custom validations. I'm actually not using the complete syntax from here. I'm actually making things simpler for you. So first thing, system validations will be checked. Second thing, your before triggers will be checked. Before triggers, before insert, before update, before delete. Then custom validations. What are custom validations? Custom validations are the validations which you have defined. You also define the validation, that this validation rules that we have learned. Those will come into picture. If it clears these three stages, 1, 2, 3, okay, then you see this here, data is inserted into database. Okay, insert, it is happening in insert operation or update operation, whatever it is. Okay, but important thing is data is not committed. It's temporarily inserted into the database. It is not yet committed to the database. Okay, so this data is just inserted into the database at this stage as a temporary insert. Okay, why this temporary insert? Because after some time it might need a rollback. So committed is something, once committed then there is no rollback, right? So this is where the data is inserted into the database, or it is inserted but it's not committed to the database. So not permanently. I mean, for simple understanding, for people who do not understand what committed will mean, it will mean that not permanently entered into the system, so temporarily stored into our table. Okay. After that, our after triggers will work. Fine. You can have your after triggers here. So whatever your after triggers are there. So after insert, after update, after delete, those after triggers will work. Then your out of the box functionalities. So out of the box functionalities, what do we have? All your Salesforce out of the box functionalities, something like a workflow, assignment rule, escalation rules, this is the sequence. Assignment rule comes first, then the auto response rule. So let me put it in this sequence only. These things will come. So these are all out of the box functionalities: auto response, assignment, escalations, workflows. These things will work, and after this, basically your data will be committed to the database. After all these things happen, then it is permanently added to the database. Data, sorry. Got this? Fine. So this is how your, the moment, it's not again this thing is not about Apex. It is not specific to Apex. It has got nothing to do with Apex. It is just for your understanding. Whenever you save a record from a user interface also, this is what happens. The record first off checks system validations, then it checks before triggers, then it checks custom validations, then it is inserted, not committed. Data is committed. Okay, I just need to. Got this thing here? So this is for our general understanding. Now, the other thing that we were talking about is a transaction. Okay, so a complete cycle from here to here, where a system validation process starts until the time the data is committed, is called a transaction. Is called as one transaction in Salesforce, right? So if you have multiple records which are to be inserted through a trigger, right, multiple records, then what happens, that trigger comes, it runs the loop. We have seen that for, and then we throw error or something. So it runs the loop, okay, and then it comes here, it goes back. So it keeps on adding things here. Final committed happens after that complete trigger is worked out. So this works as one transaction. In case we are using an insert operation. For your insert operation, one record will come till here, then go back again come here, go back, third record will come, go back. That is what happens. None of the record is permanently committed to the database, and the moment it finds an error, it rolls back the entire thing. But for our database.insert, what happens? Every record is committed. Fine. So even if it finds an error here, it skips that part, goes to the next record, does not roll back the entire stuff. Remaining records which do not have error, at least those are inserted. Fine. Now I think one of our sessions someone had this question also. I said that we'll be talking about this. So now, depending on your requirement, you will choose the one that you want. If you want the entire data to be rolled back, use insert operation. Normally we are used to using the insert operation, but if you just want that, okay, fine, one error should not affect the entire data, then you should use database.insert. Simple logic. No confusing factor there. So in case, a very common question which is asked in most of the interviews, what is the difference between insert and database.insert? The simple thing is, insert operation will either perform the entire lot of records, or it will roll back the entire thing. Database.insert will perform whatever is correct. Correct? Just give me 1 minute. 1 minute. Yeah, okay. So are we clear on this? Do we have any questions here on this part? So we understand a transaction, we understand the order of execution. Order of execution is for you to understand the transaction part. And then we understand the difference between an insert and database.insert, right? So I have actually put the link to both these things. Order of execution also, I would suggest if you do not understand what is mentioned here, you should understand this one. This is easier, right? The out of the box functionality, also known as OTB, right? So yeah, so if you understand this much, it's fine for you. If you want to understand a little in details, you can refer to this also. This link is there. This is all from reference guide actually. And this database, so okay. Database is a class. Okay. Now there are a few system classes that we have in Salesforce. Okay. System class means we have seen that we can define a class and then we can define a method inside that, and then how do we call that? Class.method name. We do it like that, right? So there are a few system classes in Salesforce and they have predefined methods. Like trigger. Trigger is what? It's a system class. How does Salesforce understand that this trigger.new means this? Because there is a class which is defined. You don't get to see the code of that. But what is that? That is actually a class. Trigger.new is what? New is a method in that, which returns NS object. Isn't it so? So this is what we have to understand. Once you understand this thing, you can use any logic in Salesforce or Apex. So trigger is a system defined class which they have defined, and we don't get to, like we have standard object, custom object. The same way they have certain classes that they do not allow us to see what the coding is there. But we know, that is a class. So, trigger. Now then there are a few methods under trigger. Trigger.new, trigger.isUpdate. Give me 1 minute. Let me show it to you. Trigger class. So for example, this trigger thing, right? So trigger is a class and it has these following variables or methods, basically what you call it. So you can define that trigger.isInsert, isUpdate, isDelete, isBefore, isAfter, isUndelete. So these are all the methods there. So trigger is a system class. Same way our database thing that we were looking into, database is a system class, and these are all the methods there. Fine, we don't need to understand, I mean, anyone who is thinking that, oh my god, there are so many, how do I remember all these things, don't need to understand anything. Fine, this is all reference. When you will need a query or when you will need, have a requirement like this, you will understand everything. You don't need to remember everything here. So don't even worry about that part. Only thing is that we have to understand there are certain system classes like database. Now, database dot insert is one of the methods in it. What does this class do? Basically, the point is, instead of using the normal trigger, so normal insert is the insert operation. This insert operation, this is the normal one, and the normal functionality it has is either it enters in the entire set of records or it rolls back the entire thing. Database insert is specially defined Salesforce class, and it works in the way that they have defined. So in case it finds an error, it skips and goes into the next thing and commits the rest of the data at least to the database. So that is the thing. Are we clear on this? Now there is another thing. Since we have talked about the transactions and we have talked about the order of execution and all these things, there is another thing that we need to understand. That is going to be the last thing. Governor limits. Anyone has any questions so far, please let me know. I am going into the other stuff which is called governor limits. So governor limit is also a very simple concept. I just want you to understand that part. Okay, what is governor limit? Simply, Salesforce is something which runs on a multi-tenant environment. So if it is running on a multi-tenant environment, it has to have a limit, right? I mean, it has to give, put a limit to every user or every Salesforce or every organization which is, or every client of Salesforce, right? For example, when you board a flight, you see that you have a limited seat, right? You cannot say that, okay, fine, I'll sleep on this entire seat and I will not let others sit, right? So what they have done, they have created a small specific seat for you. You have to sit within that, because it's a multi-tenant thing. If it is your own car, you sleep on it, you sit on it, whatever you do. But because it's a multi-tenant environment, limit need to be defined that, okay, this user should be able to use this much only. This is your limit, right? Same way, Salesforce runs on a multi-tenant environment, and because it is a multi-tenant environment, it defines limits for each of the user who will be able to use how much. So other limits we have seen, right? How many objects, how much storage of data and all that stuff, other things we have seen. Now the point is about what you do through Apex, right? Let's say you are doing an insert. In an insert, if you are trying to insert 1 million records, that will be, again become a big transaction, and that will affect the performance of others. We understand this part, right? Everyone is working on the same environment, which means if I have a Salesforce org and Ramkrishna has one more, and if Ramkrishna has started, performing an insert operation of 10 million records in one go, definitely, I mean, my performance will also get affected. The entire Salesforce platform performance will get affected, right? That is the reason why there are certain governor limits, and we need to work with those governor limits. We need to understand and work with those. What are the governor limits here? Let me just show you a few examples. So this is what we have here. Fine, and if you read the governor limits, you will most of them will make sense to you easily, right? And you will understand why those are there. So simple thing, because Apex runs in a multi-tenant environment, the Apex runtime engine strictly enforces a number of limits to ensure that runaway Apex doesn't monopolize shared resources, right? So your Apex should not affect the shared resources for that. So a simple example says total number of SQL queries issued. So what is the total number of SQL queries that you can issue? How many SQL queries you can have? 100 for a synchronous thing, and asynchronous maximum 200. Total number of records retrieved by SQL query. So one SQL query cannot return more than 50,000 records. Okay.
Jeet, one question.
Mm-hmm.
When you say total number of SQL queries issued, is it with respect to one program or one day or 1 hour? What?
This is all for one transaction.
One transaction.
One transaction, yes. So in one transaction, you cannot have more than 100 SQL queries executed. Okay. Tell me.
Sorry. So one transaction in the sense like one program execution of what? Like,
yeah.
Because what?
Yes. Yes. So one transaction, if you remember, this is what we were talking on the transaction thing. From this process to this complete cycle is one transaction. So within this one transaction, you cannot have more than 100 SQL queries. So like if you are using a trigger, and you have SQL queries in a for loop, right?
Okay.
So you cannot have that query run more than 100 times.
Okay.
Fine. So that is one limit. You cannot, okay, one query should not return more than 50,000 records. So if there are your query, if you have put a query, select this from this table and it is returning 70,000, it will only take first 50,000. Will not return on. So you have to make sure that your return should be of 50,000. Okay. Database.get query locator. This is again another query option which we have. For that it is only 10,000, not 50,000. So this is again from the database class that we depend. Total number of SOSL queries issued. SOSL, it's not SOQL, this is SOSL. So total number of SOSL is only 20, not even 100. Okay, total number of records retrieved by SOSL is 2000. So SOSL basically, if you remember, we saw that SOSL can search in all the tables, so it does not go and search in one table. So for that reason, SOSL has lesser limits because SOSL eats up a lot of space. Okay, so that means you have limit for almost everything. Okay, so for example, we in one of the other examples we used a send email method, right? We sent email through email method. So total number of send emails is 10. So you can have 10 send emails. So this inbound send email. Okay, so this send email method, as you can see, there are only 10, right? And there is a limitation of sending close to 10,000 or 50,000 emails. There's a limit. So how many emails you can send? Send email method can have, to address can be a list and it can have 1,000 email addresses, right? So total number of send email methods which are allowed is 10. Just to give you an idea. So there are a lot of places where you have governor limits. So just taking this example of send email. So what you will need to understand here is send email method. So any method which has the send email, the limitation for that is 10, and send email method limitation is 10, and there is another limitation on how many emails can be sent. Okay, how many recipients can be delivered the email to. So it is either 10,000 or 50,000. Right, so for your enterprise and unlimited, I think it's 50K. I do not remember the exact figures. So then what you have to do, you have to work on both the sides. You have to keep in mind that how many people. You cannot say that, okay, fine, in 10 send methods, one send method I will send it to 1 million recipients. That is also not workable. And there is a limit. So there is a limit on the number of send methods. There is a limit on the total number of emails which can be sent, and there is a limit on what is the maximum number of emails in one send method. One send method can have I think 1,000 for your normal editions and 5,000 for your unlimited edition, something like this, right? So this is how things are. So everything is controlled, right? So when you start writing, your code and all these things, where you are, querying the data, or you are trying to do the DML operation, so you would see that there is another option of DML operation also. Total number of DML statements. How many DML statements can you use? 150. So DML statement does not mean that 150 times you can write insert. Within a loop, if the same insert operation happens 150 times, that is also reach the limit, right? Got it? So in the loop, if the same DML statement is executing multiple times, that will also be counted in your governor limit. Got that thing? So primarily you need to understand the SQL queries. There are a lot of other things. Whatever can be done in Apex, everything has governor limits, like send emails, everything. So primarily what we need to understand is that your SQL queries, what is the maximum result on the SQL queries or the SOSL queries, and the DML statements. This is primarily there. There's a very nice thing in this workbook. I showed you the workbook, right? So in the workbook there is a small example which shows you how do you manage to work with these governor limits. Now what you have to do, you have to spread things across your queries as well as the DML statements. So if you have to deal with huge bulk or huge amount of data, you cannot do it in one single DML operation, because one single DML operation can also not have too many things. See, if you want to avoid multiple DML operations because you will hit this 150 limit, you say that okay fine, I'll put everything in one single bulk and then I'll upload it. Then there is also a limit. Total number of records processed as a DML statement is 10,000. So again you hit a limit here. So for everything there is a limit. So I would just say that there is a small example here. We saw the Apex workbook, right? So in Apex workbook now you can find this thing. Tutorial 13 is pretty useful. Running Apex with execution governor limits. Now this is a very simple and nice example of writing efficient SOQL queries and writing efficient DML statements. So bulkifying your DML calls so that you do not hit the governor limit quickly, and writing this efficient SOQL query so that you do not hit the governor limit quickly. Santosh, we are almost done. Hardly 2-3 more minutes. Alright. So got this thing. So I think I will give you this link on the Word doc. So during your interview, sometimes they might ask you that okay fine, if there are governor limits, what do you think is the best practice to avoid governor limit? There is no best practice as such, but these are only things that we can try, right? And then we are, see, there is no such code which can be written to escape all these governor limits. We have to work within the governor limit. That is the end of the story. We have to work within that. Fine. There are some times where in your interview or sometimes people say that okay fine, how do we escape governor limit? There is actually no way of escaping. The only thing is that we can do the maximum or optimum utilization of whatever has been allowed, right? So in case I am allowed to do 100 DML statements and 10,000 each, so how can I use that to the maximum, right? Instead of inserting one record at a time and reaching the 150 DML statement quota very quickly. So instead of that, we have to have these things, this understanding, right? So this is what we have here. And for the governor limit also, this is a link. Fine. So yeah, so I think we have talked about quite a few things today. We have talked about the governor limits, we have talked about the database class, we have talked order of execution, triggers. So yeah, so there are a few more things that we need to talk. But what I would suggest is today I would want you guys to actually go back, work on these things. Take 1 day's time. So we will not do the session tomorrow. We will do it day after tomorrow. Take a day's time because there is a lot to digest. And at this stage, I do not want to do the sessions very frequently and put a lot of things to you. So let's skip tomorrow's session. Day after tomorrow again, because we again have a lot of things to learn in that session. So how do we create the packages? How do we create our application, give it to someone else? How do we work with customer portal, partner portals, and how do we work with sites? A lot of new things, right? And then we have a few examples from Apex that we will talk about, right? So that is the thing. So tomorrow we will not do a session because today's was a longer session, and I do understand that you need time to digest this. We will not do a session tomorrow. Day after tomorrow we will again connect same time, and that will be on our more things, right? Fine. I'm just going to share this with you. Take out some time and go through these things.